Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. In the beginning, Brahma created four great sages named Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana and Sanat Kumara. All of them were unwilling to adopt materialistic activities because they were highly elevated due to their semen flowing upwards. Purport. Although Brahma created the principles of nascence as a matter of necessity for those living beings who were destined to ignorance by the will of the Lord, he was not satisfied in performing such a thankless task. He therefore created four principles of knowledge: Sankhya, or empirical philosophy for the analytical study of the material conditions; Yoga, or mysticism for liberation of the pure soul from material bondage; Vairagya, the acceptance of complete detachment from material enjoyment in the life to elevate oneself to the highest spiritual understanding; and tapas, or the various kinds of voluntary austerities performed for spiritual perfection. Brahma created the four great sages Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana and Sanat to entrust them with these four principles of spiritual advancement. And they inaugurated their own spiritual party or sampradaya known as Kumara Sampradaya, or later on as the Nimbarka Sampradaya, for the advancement of bhakti. All of these great sages became great devotees, for without devotional service to the personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta Bhagavad. So this chapter, creation of the Kumaras and others. So here Brahma created four great sages, namely Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana and Sanat Kumara. As part of this creation, Prabhupada mentions in the purport, first Brahma created the principles of nascence, because just like you have Sattvagun, Rajogun and Tamogun, there will be some people who are very tamasic in nature, attracted to tamasic activities. Somebody can argue why Tamoguna was required or why Rajoguna. Only Sattvaguna can be there, everyone will be Sattvic. As we know, there are 84 lakh species. So some are in Tamoguna, Tamasic, attracted to Tamasic activities, have Tamasic inclinations. Likewise, Rajoguna, some people are very Rajasic in nature. So Brahma created principle of nascence as a matter of necessity. For those living beings who are destined to ignorance by the will of the Lord. But even Maya, although it's an agent of the Lord, it is doing a thankless job of keeping the living entities in illusion. It's an agent of the Lord, divine energy of the Lord, Mama Maya. Just like a jail superintendent, he's an obedient government servant, but he's doing a thankless job of imprisoning, beating, taking care of the criminal people with criminal mindset. So Brahma, after creating the principle of nascence, he was not satisfied. He has to create, because such living entities are there. Government has to create a prison house, has to have a police force which will beat those who disobey the law. He therefore created four principles of knowledge. What are the four principles we read in the purport? Anyone? Let's recollect. Sankhya, Yoga, Vairagya and Tapas. So Sankhya is empirical, philosophical for analytical study of material conditions. yoga or mysticism for liberation of the pure soul from material bondage through yoga, different yogas, karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, bhakti yoga, how the soul which is entangled can get liberated. And then vairagya, the acceptance of complete detachment from material enjoyment in life to elevate oneself to the highest spiritual understanding. So the more vairagya manifests in our consciousness, in our behavior, in our actions, more vairagya, the more we will be divya gyan hridaya prakashito. Directly proportional. The more bhogaishwarya prasakta nam taya prita chetasam, bhoga and aishwarya. If vairagya is not, then bhoga and aishwarya, we are bewildered. Vivasayatmika buddhi, that steady intelligence, the determination will not come about. So vairagya, which enables one to elevate to the highest spiritual understanding, and tapas, to get vairagya, tapas is required. Of various kinds of voluntary austerities performed for spiritual perfection. Getting up early in the morning. Many of the things which we are doing for a conditioned soul, it's a big tapas. But it is required. Vairagya, tapas, yoga, to elevate to the platform of knowledge and free oneself from material bondage. And then Brahma created the four Kumaras, who all became great devotees. And in the next, I will not get into details, next verse we'll be reading tomorrow. The four sons of Brahma, the Kumaras, were entrusted, because Brahma is the progenitor. He wanted to create progeny, populate. So he instructed his sons, you also get married and create progeny. But the four Kumaras declined to be family men, even on the request of their great father Brahma. And then Prabhupada writes in the purport, those who are serious about getting released from material bondage should not be entangled in the false relationship of family bondage. We know that there are four ashramas, Brahmacharya ashram, Grahastha ashram, Vanaprastha ashram, and Sannyas ashram. It is required, just like ignorance is required, tamoguna. So there will be definitely some souls who cannot practice the highest. So Shastras allow, Vedas allow regulated sense enjoyment. Prabhupada says, not like cats and dogs, unregulated. So it is allowed. Grahastha ashram is a bona fide ashram. And among the Mahajanas also, who are authorities, there are many who are Grahasthas. But Prabhupada differentiates between Grahastha and Grahamedis. Grahastha also is ashrama. And there are stringent rules even in Grahastha ashram. Prabhupada says doesn't give a license to enjoy unrestricted sex just because somebody is married. And then Prabhupada also explains, if one gets married thinking that wife is a machine for enjoying unlimited sex, he is mistaken. In fact, just like we have regulative principles, likewise, there are regulative principles. In fact, strictly speaking, as per Vedic this thing, sexual indulgence is only for procreation. So here, the Kumaras, they were very pure. They were practicing devotional service, tapas, And here in this verse it is mentioned, they were highly elevated. What was the last line? Anyone remembers? Translation we read. They were highly elevated because Urdhva Saha, because due of their semens flowing upwards. Semen is a creative force. It creates life. It has that, and that's how in Ayurveda it is said it is Sapta Dhatu. It is the most finest. It says that how the food we eat gets transformed to blood, and then it's a whole hierarchy. Bone marrow, and then finally the Sapta Dhatu, it is the semen. Prabhupada in one place says Mahatma Gandhi, at the young age of 36 years, he gave up sex life. And that made him so determined. He decided that I will free this country, again at a material level. But just because he gave up, Prabhupada explains in the one book, he was so determined. So it is important that we understand the principles properly. All of us have come with very good intentions to advance, to purify, to free ourselves of this entanglement. Unless we understand and practice sincerely, sooner or later we may feel, I'm not improving, I'm not advancing, I'm still stuck. Prabhupada gives example of that boat marriage party. Night they left off the shore, and next day morning when they opened their eyes, they thought probably they have reached quite a distance towards the destination, but they found the boat was in the same place because the anchors were still on. So practicing the principles of brahmacharya, if done strictly, it will be a big enabler for us to advance in our spiritual consciousness. And if we violate those principles, then it will definitely retard or it will hold us back. It will keep us, while tapas is going on, while austerity is going on, still there won't be much tangible movement, tangible advancement. So I'll briefly touch up, there was one nice article written by an ISKCON devotee where he talks about the practice of brahmacharya, the challenges which a brahmachari can face, will face in present circumstances, in present times. Can anyone tell what is, Krishna in the Gita says, what are the sitting places of lust? Senses, mind and intelligence are sitting places of, covers the real knowledge of the living entity. Among the senses, which is the most prominent, if although all senses lust is there, but in the practice of brahmacharya, which is the biggest culprit? Biggest culprit. So it is eyes and the mind. And this article he nicely builds up. Again, this is not, no way, he has done his analysis why he is talking about. And although all senses, lust is there, Krishna says, senses, mind, and intelligence are sitting place of the lust. Through mind, we can contemplate. And entry point of lust is through the eyes. Visual impurity. That's why you see Bilva Mangala Thakur also, after having got so-called beating from Chintamani, was chastised. What kind of man you are? If so much attachment you had to Krishna, where will you be? Left the father cremation in that river which was in the floods, risking his life, catching hold of a dead corpse, reached the house of Chintamani. It was raining. Although the door was locked, huge big boundary wall, climbed, holding a snake, shows the kind of desperation at any cost, at the cost of risking one's life. And then finally, when Chintamani opened the door and saw him standing fully drenched, because she never expected that in this weather he would ever come, and he was there, then Chintamani spoke, "Alas, if this much love you had for Krishna, where your life would be." It struck him. And then he decided that he will go towards, where did he head? Anyone? Vrindavan. He decided enough is enough, and in search of Krishna goes to Vrindavan. En route, what happens? He saw another woman and he couldn't take his eyes off. Followed that woman, reached her house. I don't know the exact details, but somehow even conveyed those days, when a guest comes home, he is considered as a deva, so whatever the guest hospitality, whatever is required by the guest, whatever he wants is served. And he even proposed, I want to enjoy. And it seems that arrangement also was made. But then he realized, what am I? I'm heading towards Vrindavan. And these eyes are still cheating me. And then he asked for hairpin. And he pricks his eyes. So, this article very nicely says we have to be careful, because this is one kind of gratification which we can get, but nobody can make out. If you have to eat something with the tongue, it's gross object you have to eat. You cannot eat air. Ears, gross sound. But visual impurity, nobody may know. And one may be gratifying and seeking that illicit gratification. And it is said in this article, I'll read out, it says the ignition for men's lust is the ignition, just the ignition of the engine, it is the eyes. Our eyes are means to lust broadly and at will. It's freely available. You can, more so in present times. Billboards everywhere. Prabhupada explains in the purport that Ajamila, what he saw, it's very common now these days. And then Prabhupada in the purport writes, for a brahmachari to control after seeing this, it's very difficult. But then he explains, it's not a hopeless state if we catch hold of Krishna's lotus feet. We do not need to date. Date means you organize a meeting. If you want to indulge and enjoy, you don't need a physical woman. You don't need a date. You don't have to physically meet. Still, that gratification can be sought. We have our eyes to call upon, and we can draw genuine sexual gratification through them at any time. That's why example is given. Lakshmana, what was he asked? Do you recognize this? Sita Mata's. She says, I just looked at her feet. One may have complete knowledge, all this knowledge, senses, mind, this thing. That's why Krishna, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a person's intelligence. Even one of the roaming senses. Which is the roaming senses which is most common and more so very gullible in present times? It's the eyes. All that knowledge, all that intelligence, all that this thing will be left aside and all that knowledge is taken away. Carry away a person's intelligence. Like Ajamila, he was Brahmana, he was learned Brahmana. He was aware, he had sense control, all this austerity, yoga, tapas, vairagya, everything he had learned. But couldn't take his eyes off. Men are sexually stimulated by visual stimuli. This stimulation can come from a dance scene or from a photograph. And these days, everywhere, so easily, so freely visible. Men have a visual ignition switch when it comes to viewing the female body. And it's also a fact, many articles, many people, the women, their ignition switch is different. It's not visual. It's more of relationship and touch. Again, these are all yantras. Finally, it is a soul. Soul is having that lusty desire to enjoy independent of Krishna. In a yantra of a female body, it manifests in one way. In the yantra of a male body, it manifests in another. Modern science allows us to understand that chemically, the underlying nature of addiction is nearly addiction to illicit gratification, addiction to watching wrong things, addiction to visiting wrong sites. The other day, when Madhupanipu was there, association was there, some college students was there. It's a big challenge, present time. This visual stimulation is freely available. And before a person realizes he's already addicted. Heroin, all these drugs is not so freely available. You have to pay money for it. Even so-called simple drugs, even alcohol, even smoking, even cigarette. The other day I was in the passport office. So outside, I had to wait for some time, and outside there was a tea stall. I did not know that a cigarette these days costs about 20 rupees. I remember my college days, friends used to, it was 1 rupee. And Big line, one after the other, because I had to wait for about half an hour, one after the other. And surprising part is there were many women and no lajja. Prabhupada says the safety wall. If that is gone, the society, Varna Sankara, will set in. And that is what is happening. A lady came, she bought 2 cigarettes. I said, how she's going to smoke 2 cigarettes? She lit both the cigarettes and then she went. Her boyfriend was standing there. And both of them were nicely smoking. And this is the new normal. This is normal. This is not. When we went to Mumbai first time when I saw, I thought maybe, but now it is like a new normal. There is no, what will others think? What will others say? That concern is not there at all. And it is very common sight. So, even for this addiction, smoking is an addiction, alcohol is an addiction, you have to pay money. Then you get that chemical in your bloodstream. And then you get addicted. In this case, you don't have to pay money. And you can get addicted because brain is still getting the chemicals. Almost similar chemicals what it gets by other addictions. And there are names for these chemicals, dopamine and all these things. And before a person realizes, he's already addicted, because you do it, you get that chemicals, there's a feel-good factor, there's an enjoyment, you again do it, you again get it, you again do it, the brain starts seeking those chemicals, craving. And because it is free, it is so easily accessible, it's easily available, you get addicted, you want more. And to get that same high, you require a higher degree, a greater degree. What started off just like a thrill out of curiosity, you want more, deeper, higher, longer. And then it says, stop for a moment, let it sink in. Just think about it. The eye, when viewing an adult content, it's like a needle full of heroin being injected into the bloodstream. Like you have seen some drug addicts, they're taking an injection and then they'll get that high. It's exactly what is happening chemically to the brain. The truth is, although the battle for purity has spiritual components, there's a devotee who is writing this, it is actually a lot more physical in scope than most men realize. The purity, it's purity, and beginning with eyes. Beating yourself up that I am not spiritually enough, I am spiritually weak, I am spiritually this thing, I am good for nothing, I am not a good devotee. Somebody beats, I am not able to control my senses. Who knows, you may be very good in sadhana. You may have all knowledge, you might have done good reading in the morning. But if this is not controlled, hoy sarvanash. Which Krishna also says. Even one of the roaming senses on which mind focuses, you give your attention to the sense object, carries away the person's intelligence. And then guilt feeling comes, krodha, anger comes. Why did I do that? If a person is genuinely trying to practice. Krodhat bhavati samma, samoha smriti vibrama, buddhi nasho. All that follows. It is far too simplistic and being not spiritual is far too simplistic and not helpful. For most men, the battle is more about guarding their eyes. It starts with eyes. If eyes are not guarded, you have all the knowledge, but unintentionally, unknowingly, that gratification is happening, which is illicit, and getting that chemical high in the blood, and which is addictive in nature. Our innate male design, particularly our visual nature, helps explain the prevalence of sexual sin among many devotees also. There's a devotee in London who has written this article. If you're ever going to learn how to manage your lusty desires properly, obviously needs to guard the eyes very effectively. If one cannot control his eyes, then they will keep building pathways to the brain and flooding it with addictive pleasure chemicals. Every time a visual sign which gives you a pleasure feeling, there's some chemical release in the brain. Then this devotee is writing, oh, do not be so hard on yourself, one may say. इतना अपने आप को नहीं कंट्रोल करना, ये नहीं देखना, ये नहीं देखना. One might say it is natural for a male to look. Lord has made some beautiful forms. What is wrong in? That's part of our nature. It is exactly this, the mindset, which will keep us trapped in lust rather than becoming pure. Sure, it may be natural for a male to look, but one is meant to purify from all kinds of lust and become Krishna conscious. That's what we have come here for, to get purified of all lustful propensities and become Krishna conscious. That's why Prabhupada also explains that to see women is not wrong. To see women with lusty propensity is wrong. And right now, the mind will cheat. No, I am not seeing with lusty propensity. That's why Vedic times, all the safety measures are to see as mother, Mataji, call this thing. These are all safety things which are created. Actually, sexual impurity is a series of bad decisions, sometimes because of immature and improper understanding, and purification will not happen instantly. One has to strictly follow the principles of brahmacharya and associated do's and don'ts, so that all impurities of the mind can be cleaned up. From the perspective of daily practice, it is simply to make series of right choices. You will be pure when you choose not to lust and seek illicit sexual gratification through your eyes. Maya's greatest weapon against you is deception. Maya knows that you can be free if you become Krishna conscious. Maya knows if you become Krishna conscious, you will be free. Maya also knows that once you follow the process and the principles, victory is for sure. So she deceives and confuses you. She whispers, tricking you and thinking you are a helpless victim, someone who will always be under the sway of lust. So Maya deceives. Maya has many traps, gross and subtle. Maya laughs at you and loves telling you that looking at women and lusting is just part of being a man. There is nothing you can do about it. You quit fighting it. Maya deceives and confuses you and whispers, God would have not made women this beautiful if He had not wanted you to enjoy them this way. So there are various traps, various rationale which mind can suggest. So that's why to regulate this sense enjoyment, there is a grahastha ashram. Even if there is indulgence, it is with one's wife. regulated. In other words, victory means stopping the sexual gratification that comes into a person's from outside of marriage. However, how does one stop it? Well, one first need to ask where it comes from. Major source of that ignition, that engine, starting of that lusty desires and hope. That's why even Madhuprabhu in one of those things he says, search, find. Then chase, capture. Indulge, enjoy. Visual input goes in, hope and desires get activated. Then first loop of search and find, amplification of hope and desire happens. Chase and capture, chasing, hoping that I will get enjoyment. Another amplification happens, amplification of hope and desire. Then indulge and enjoy, another amplification of hope and desire happens. Sense object, which is relatively has a very bland pleasure, flat pleasure, gets amplified by the mind. And it starts with search and find. And searching starts with eyes. Search, find, chase, capture, indulge, enjoy. All amplifications, all happening in the mind. That's why visual purity is very important. And it is challenging in present times because of Kaler dosha nidhe rajan. But if we strictly practice the principles, the do's and don'ts, sometimes mind also cheats. Itna strict hone ka jarurat nahi hai. Strictly follow the do's and don'ts, then we are safe. So we'll stop here. Anyone has any question? Anything like to ask? So we'll see that how these four Kumaras, they were very pure, very strict in their practices. Urdhva retasa, semen was completely retained, and because of that, they were very spiritually advanced. And if the semen is not retained, if it is not conserved, if it is, every time a person visually indulges, gratifies visually, the semen, that dhatu is segregated from the blood. Then it has to come out, either voluntary or involuntary. Sometimes people think that there is school of thought which says that it is being segregated, it has to come out. What's wrong in masturbation? Nothing wrong. But if one is pure in his thinking, feeling, willing, his actions, his behavior, his visual, this thing, it will not segregate. It's a dhatu, fine, sukshma dhatu. It will rise to the brain and a person will be enlightened. Tejas. They say, no, earlier their faces were bright. It's because of this Shakti. So we'll stop here. Granth Raj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.